We're going to take a closer look at Teflon tonight. Yes, the household product that millions of people have in their homes. Teflon is now in hundreds of products, from pots and pans to stain-resistant clothing. And now there are questions about the safety of a key chemical used to make it.
A slow-motion disaster.
Dangerous chemicals.
PFAS.
PFAS.
So-called forever chemicals.
Forever chemicals in our drinking water.
Per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, are a man-made family of chemicals that are used in the manufacture of products, including Teflon and Scotchgard. Although the chemical companies manufacturing them, DuPont and 3M, knew that PFAS posed health risks. For 30 years they hid this from the EPA, failing their legal responsibility and violating basic human rights. In 1999, Robert Bilott launched the first lawsuit about the environmental effects of PFAS. The lawsuit and Bilott's continued work brought PFAS to worldwide attention, spurring ongoing scientific research, government investigations, and policy reforms aimed at limiting both PFAS and other hazardous chemicals. In the post-World War II boom, chemical companies like DuPont and 3M created product lines to place their products at the center of modern life. Household materials like nylon, saran wrap, Scotchgard, and Teflon became household necessities, fitting DuPont's motto,
"Better things for better living through chemistry."
Many of these products were made using a PFAS called perfluorooctanoic acid, or PFOA. In 1950, 3M, the PFOA supplier of DuPont, began conducting health studies on PFAS. They found it caused liver, kidney, and spleen enlargement, and the scientists labeled it as toxic. Workers would experience what they called the Teflon flu, where they would exhibit flu-like symptoms after working with Teflon. A quarter of all pregnant employees working with the chemical gave birth to babies with facial deformities, the same deformities exhibited by animals in the later studies.
The pain that you feel when you know the truth and someone lies to you it's hard to equate, but you know it's something that just shakes you. So you feel betrayed from my mom's perspective, because this was a company that she'd given everything to.
The Toxic Substances Control Act, or TSCA, placed the responsibility on companies to report if a new chemical could cause human or environmental health effects. However, PFOA was grandfathered, and DuPont 3M kept their studies secret. In 1998, Robert Bilott, a corporate defense attorney who usually defended companies like DuPont, was contacted by Wilbur Tennant, a farmer whose land bordered a DuPont dump in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Tennant had noticed that the creek that ran through his farm from the landfill was foaming, and soon his cows, along with the local wildlife, were dying one by one. In the end, Tennant lost 153 cows, his entire herd. The amount of PFOA found there was 10,000 times the EPA's current limit. The breakthrough in the case occurred when Bilott discovered DuPont internal documents discussing a chemical called C8, the company nickname for PFOA. Now that he knew the name of the chemical, he could request disclosure of all C8 documents from DuPont. Those documents revealed the toxicity of PFOA and DuPont's knowledge of it. DuPont settled with Tennant for an undisclosed amount in 2001.
That was the first case where we really discovered that these chemicals even existed. A lot of this information had been known by the companies making and using these chemicals, but hadn't been disclosed to the rest of us, hadn't been disclosed to the public, to the scientific community, to regulators. And it was through that lawsuit that Mr. Tennant brought that information finally got out to the rest of the world.
Winning the case wasn't enough for Bilott. He felt a responsibility to the people who were still being exposed to PFOA. In 2001, Bilott risked his position at his law firm and wrote a letter to the EPA informing them about the dangers of PFAS. When the EPA did not take action, Bilott filed a class action lawsuit against DuPont on behalf of the 70,000 affected residents of Parkersburg. Bilott incorporated into the $343 million settlement a large-scale independent health survey to investigate the impact of PFOA on residents. It became the largest health study on a chemical in history, involving over 69,000 participants. The results were clear. PFAS was linked with kidney cancer, testicular cancer, ulcerative colitis, thyroid disease, high cholesterol, and pregnancy-induced hypertension.
the information that we discovered through the Tennant family's lawsuit really revealed a massive public and environmental threat. It revealed that we were dealing with these man-made chemicals that were in drinking water, in soil, in the air, in plants, in animals, and in people all over the planet, and that these chemicals presented a massive threat to human health and to the environment. And unfortunately, most people didn't know about it still. So I think it was incredibly important that we did everything we could to make sure that that information got out to regulators, to lawmakers, to the media, to the public, to folks that could take the steps necessary to begin protecting people from these chemicals. So it really felt, we felt we had an obligation to make sure that that threat was addressed.
Ballot's health study brought the dangers of PFAS into the public sphere, launched more studies into the impacts of PFAS, and gave affected parties evidence for future lawsuits. There are thousands of different PFAS variants still used in products like fast food containers, rain jackets, cookware, and microwave popcorn.
They have a responsibility to humanity, and I know that's a very generalized statement, but they really do. You can look at the statistics and the research that's been shown where the C8, this chemical, is in the blood of polar bears. They did testing and they couldn't find any clean blood. They had to go all the way back to the 1950s to find blood without C8 in it. So the responsibility is, number one, to stop making the chemical and the variations of the chemical. That's a no-brainer.
Because PFAS are slow to degrade, they are called forever chemicals. PFAS are also water-soluble and migrate freely into groundwater. 45% of the U.S.'s drinking water is known to be contaminated with PFAS.
PFAS ranks number one in all the contaminants in the world for all time because it affects the greatest population that is ever seen in the history of chemistry.
Although 3M phased out two of the most widely used PFAS chemicals, PFOA and PFOS, in 2015, DuPont spun off a company which is still making a new PFAS variant called Gen-X.
I have friends in North Carolina that are dealing with this in their water, the brand new variation, which within a short period of time was in the water right next to one of the plants.
Since Tennant v. DuPont, there have been thousands of lawsuits against DuPont 3M. As of 2023, they are set to pay $11.4 billion in damages to 500-plus communities for contaminating their drinking water. That same year, the United Nations Council for Human Rights condemned DuPont and other companies over PFAS, charging them with human rights violations regarding their right to safe drinking water. In 2024, the EPA banned food contact products containing PFAS from being sold into the U.S. market and set strict limits on PFAS concentration in drinking water.
Now, there's some good effects that are coming as a result of PFAS. Okay? One of the good effects that's coming out of this is that the municipalities that are claiming and can prove that they have a problem can put in a filtration system that'll pull it out. In the process of doing that, they're going to be pulling out herbicides, insecticides.
The Toxic Substances Control Act was amended, giving the government more authority to test the safety of chemicals already in use.
Situation with these PFAS forever chemicals has actually been used as one of the examples of why federal laws were changed and were strengthened to try to make it clear that companies, when they have information about chemicals they're making that present a substantial risk to public health or the environment, that they need to disclose that to the United States Environmental Protection Agency and to the public.
If not for the courageous work of attorney Rob Ballot, the world may have never known about the dangers of PFAS. Through his work on the Tennant v. DuPont case, Ballot discovered and publicized the dangers of PFOA. His ingenuity to pursue the C8 health study launched a field of PFAS research and laid the groundwork to bring PFAS manufacturers to accountability. Ballot's work has led to the strengthening of the EPA and of more effective regulation of not only PFAS, but also hundreds of other potentially harmful chemicals.